an old saying says, "May you live in interesting times." It's considered something of a mixed blessing. I think interesting times create opportunities, and what's most interesting about the current time that we live in is the advent of the digital economy. And beyond Council's traditional role, I believe that there's significant opportunity for local government to play in expanding the digital economy. My first point is clear. High-speed broadband is fundamental to the future of our country. It's fundamental to long-term innovation and keeping us within the world economy. Studies have found that high-speed broadband, or HSB as I like to call it, has and can deliver significant economic growth. Now, these figures may look small, but when you take into account our recent growth figures of around 2%, this is basically an uplift of a quarter to a third in our economy. And this is not counting the possibilities we have not yet been able to imagine, let alone quantify. I'd like to highlight two examples. Key leaders in high-speed broadband here are Sweden and South Korea, who have rolled it out since a long time ago. Since they've got on high-speed broadband, these countries have seen explosive growth in innovation seen here. And the fundamental makeup of the economies have changed. What many people don't realize is that prior to high-speed broadband, Australia was actually on par with Sweden and South Korea. This could have been us easily. Now, it may seem like the boat is heading out of the harbor, but it's actually not too late. In some sense, we can still swim for it. In the case of Australia, there are many opportunities highlighted previously, but I just want to focus on two broad ones. And one's largely an urban opportunity, and the other one is fundamentally a rural opportunity. First, there's a new order in manufacturing. This image is from a study we did with the state government and 3 councils in Victoria on the opportunities that can be enabled by high-speed broadband. Much of this is already happening, and you might know it as additive manufacturing or 3D manufacturing. The other is service-oriented manufacturing, where the boundaries between manufacturing and service are sort of blurring. But there's more that lies ahead, and one that I like to highlight is reshoring. Now, we know what offshoring is. It's what we've experienced when manufacturing has left advanced economies to cheap labor resources. But reshoring is the opposite of that. And this has only recently been happening. According to BCG research, US is actually the #1 destination for North American manufacturing. And it surpassed Mexico and China, which historically have been the primary ones for the past decade. And this has only happened recently in 2015. Cheap labor is less important than what it was, because now technology and innovation can provide cost-effective measures for manufacturing. And here's an example of one. Volkswagen has recently reshored to the US after 30 years of offshoring away. And they've actually had a look at 250 sites before choosing Chattanooga. And part of the reason why is because Chattanooga could afford 10 gigabit bandwidth, allowing real-time monitoring from German headquarters. As an aside, that's 10 times the current maximum capacity of the NBN. So that's the urban opportunity. I like to talk about the rural opportunity. There's an emerging phenomenon called the Internet of Farm Things. Now, we've all heard of Internet of Things. It's, in some sense, it's sort of like the Jetsons episodes where everything in our appliance and our homes are connected and speak to each other. It's the same thing that applies to farming. It's the use of drones and remote monitoring systems to speak to each other and improve agricultural processes. And this technology, although it's recent, is actually being developed right now in Australia. This one's FenoNet, and it collects information from remote sensors across remote agricultural areas. Now, admittedly, this technology requires only low bandwidth, but it's by accessing higher bandwidth that we can actually take this further. This is an example from California of Acme Smart Farms, which allows real-time monitoring and farming, combined with real-time data analytics, to improve farming right down to the level of a seed. Now, this is important for California because they're actually going through a drought at the moment. And this has allowed them to increase their yield while reducing water wastage at the same time, allowing their agricultural farmers to stay resilient despite the changing environments around them. However, this creates a huge amount of data, and that requires new, higher bandwidth. So if we want to be an advanced manufacturer, it seems like we need higher bandwidth. If we want to be an advanced agricultural producer, we need higher bandwidth. And that's why high-speed broadband is called the fourth utility. It's absolutely essential. It's essential as electricity, gas, and water. At the moment, federal government's commitments to high-speed broadband's delivery is uncertain. It remains to be seen whether the current rollout will meet HSB standards seen around the world. Remember, Chattanooga is offering 100 times the NBN's maximum capacity. However, there's a role for local government to play in this environment, but its resources are scarce, and its ability to fund infrastructure is limited. So what can local governments do? So for those local governments who have areas, who have gaps in high-speed broadband coverage, there's practically 4 things you can do. First thing is you can wait. You can wait for fiber to the node to roll out, and then encourage local businesses to get fiber to the premises to get the best that NBN can offer. Second, you can form a consortium with other local government areas and lobby for its delivery. This is what Greater Dandenong, Kingston, and Frankston are currently exploring, to reroute the NBN to its nationally significant manufacturing clusters. Thirdly, local governments can play a risk-taking role. They can actually deliver the infrastructure themselves. It's important to note that high-speed broadband is actually as affordable as copper wiring if it's delivered in greenfield sites. Local governments can deliver high-speed broadband through developing new digitally integrated industrial estates. And the fourth one is really a case study of overseas, what they've done. Local governments can form municipal-run utility companies to deliver high-speed broadband. That's actually how it started in Sweden. Stockholm municipality started its own utility company. And that's how it started in Tennessee with Chattanooga. They started their own utility company to jumpstart the high-speed broadband. However, this is unlikely in Australia given the funding constraints at this point in time. So for those local governments who are lucky enough to have comprehensive NBN coverage, this doesn't mean you can sit on your laurels just yet. One of the reasons why we need to act quickly is because there's a lag between when the technology is available, when it's adopted, and when the benefits are fully realized. And we all know this implicitly from computers. We can imagine the lag that will be experienced by high-speed broadband. So this is some clips from the TV series of ER in the 90s. It actually provides a really good picture of the adoption of computers over that period. Despite being available since the early 1980s, many businesses were still using paper-based databases. And in ER season 1, that's how they started, basically. Even when computers were adopted, it wasn't fully utilized to its full potential. It was usually relegated to the background as a database server. And it wasn't until the late 90s and 2000s that we saw that computers were actually used productively in the workplace. So that's one thing local governments need to recognize, that technology adopts at a lag. Second is that regions adopt technology at different rates. Some are faster than others. This is all research actually from the 1920s on the adoption of hybrid seeds. To the left, places like Iowa were able to jumpstart because they had better institutions that facilitated adoption of this new technology, including better business networks and better chambers of commerce that allowed it to facilitate faster than Alabama, for example. So early adoption is absolutely crucial to get behind the productivity lag. So for those local governments that are lucky enough to have NBN coverage, what can you do to accelerate adoption? Well, the first thing you can do is to host gig-up programs. And this is actually specifically a program that was done by local governments in the United Kingdom. It effectively is a program to raise awareness amongst the business community on what the productive potential high-speed broadband has for their business. And it was usually combined with business grants to upskill their businesses and employees to improve digital literacy. The second thing you can do is actually you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can work within existing frameworks that businesses adopt technology, and it's through their institutions, through business networks, through industry organizations, where there's a well-established format of sharing knowledge, much like we're doing right now today. Remember, Iowa was ahead of the curve because they had institutions that were set up for sharing information. And thirdly, if you don't have institutions, you need to create them. Institutions are absolutely fundamental to long-term growth. Here are two I'd just like to highlight. A Farmers Business Network in the US, which covers about 18 states and 13,000 hectares of farmland, recently formed a partnership with Google Fiber to roll out high-speed broadband to them. And they've adopted much of the agricultural opportunities that I talked about earlier to have data analytics and remote monitoring to improve their agricultural processes. In Australia, we have a successful manufacturing co-op here, HunterNet in Newcastle, that have kept their industry resilient despite the declining trends at national level. But also, they promoted innovation in their business practices. These are the types of institutions that will ready business for the digital opportunities. So what I'm leaving you with this is we are well into the digital transformation, but it's not too late. Local government has a role to play in influencing how this plays out, both in rolling out the infrastructure as well as accelerating adoption. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily going to cost you that much money. Thank you.